Welcome back to another fabulous channel. I'm Jay Books Corner, and today we are sitting down to talk about the 20 books I read in August. My TBR for August was extremely long, and I read about half of it, which was pretty good. You're gonna hear purring and noises and stuff. My cat, Emmy, who she pops up in like my vlogs and stuff, is sitting on my lap, so on the chair. That's what she wants to do. That's what she gets to do. So it'll be in the entire video. I just want to announce that here. I also wanted to announce, in case anybody who really prefers the TBR video over the wrap-up video, there will not be a TBR video for the month of September. We'll come back with one in October for all my horror reads and all the fun things I do for horror. I normally read about a book a day, a horror novel a day in October. That's normally the goal. So we'll talk about all that stuff once it gets around. It's not going to be a September TBR video. With that being said, though, we're just going to jump into what I read in August. One last thing before we jump into it, I'm starting to post weekly wrap-ups over on TikTok, on my TikTok. My TikTok's always linked down below. It's just Jacob's Books Corner, I'm pretty sure. Over there, maybe it's Jacob's Books Corner YT. I don't know if Jacob's Books Corner was taken by the time I made a TikTok for you guys. I do post my thoughts, little mini reviews about all the books I read that week. That being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. The first one to talk about is Heir to the Throne of Flame by Ben Alderson. This is one of the first Ben Aldersons I've ever read, and I was told smut, gay, dragons was like, or in magic, was kind of like all that was like sold on, and so I was like, okay, I'll read it, I'll get it. And so I got an ARC, so thank you, NetGalley, for sending me a copy of this. I'm pretty sure I reviewed it. Oh god, if not, I will do that today. I read this in the very beginning of August. I think I started it in July, like middle July. I didn't really care for the novel itself. I think I landed on like a 3.5. There's objectively nothing wrong with it. I felt like it was a little bit too long. This is one of the first few books that we're going to talk about where I know there's a sequel to it, and I really felt like the last half should have been what the sequel was about, and maybe you could have been more or done more to really flesh out the beginning part, or just cut the book off somewhere in the midpoint. And I think that's what a lot of authors have a hard time figuring out, is where to end your book. And if you do have a sequel, where is the best place? And Heir to the Throne of Flames, in my opinion, about 50 to 75%. So now I feel like is a perfect spot. And so the actual like ending of the book, I didn't really care for. I would probably read the sequel when it comes out in November, but it's not going to be something that's going to be an immediate pickup for me. I do recommend. I just don't think the way that this was advertised to me was exactly correct. And I will mention there's some trigger warnings for domestic violence and a few other things. It's quite violent itself. Without some of the best parts was the actual action. I don't know if I just like really blanked out on all the dragon stuff, but I just didn't feel like there was enough dragons. Like I said, if you're interested, I think that's what sounded interesting. I think it would be fine for you to read, so I do recommend. I just didn't. It wasn't my favorite thing in the world. The next one will also be popping up on the screen, and that's Bones and the Begonia. This is a part of the lovely Lethal Gardens by Jay Mailer. I will have to mention before reading this, I read this with Books and Lava. She did a video on her channel. I'm doing a very similar video on my channel, inspired by that video and by that series, where she basically reads, I guess she's only read the first two of these, where she basically reads them in the video to you and talks about in full spoilerly, but on her channel members, which I'm a part of, it's like a read along that we do. And so I read along with her, and I hated this book. It's like a 2. I just didn't care for it, but it was fun. This is the sequel to the first one. I couldn't really tell you anything it's about. I don't know. I'll link the video though, in case you guys are interested. So continuing onward. Very sorry. It's a murder mystery series set in a small town, and these ones, she found bones at the very end of the last book in the garden, and so this one solves the murder mystery of that. And it got pretty wild towards the end, but also wild in like not my favorite way, so it's a mixed bag. Next one we're talking about is Ahsoka by E.K. Johnson. I read this as an audiobook, and Ashley Epstein, who voices the character on Clone Wars, Rebels, that type of thing outside of the TV show that just started, is the one who reads it, which I feel like really made it much more immersive for me as a reader. I'll talk about this in a full video coming up relatively shortly. I did it when I did a Clean With Me video in the beginning of August, and I adored this book up to a certain point, and then I did not like the book. I know like a 3.75. I would highly recommend in case you're interested in more Ahsoka telling. My only thing here, I'm not to the part in Rebels where this will become much more like prevalent, but I have a feeling that none of the characters in here would matter, and so like I had a hard time really caring. But the audiobook is full of like effects and audio effects and things like that, and so it makes a very fun read. It just wasn't my favorite thing in the world, but it did gear me up for the character and make me excited to jump back into Star Wars. I did what it needed to do for me personally, and like I said, I'll talk about more in a video coming up relatively soon. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the first one that I physically own. It's Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McCluskey. It's my favorite books of all time. I've talked about this so many different times, but specifically I am talking about because I reread it for the movie release coming out in the very beginning of August, which I have a whole video where I have reacted to. And I will announce it here for everybody to know. Our live reaction for this month will be Heartstoppers 2. We're going to react to the entire thing in one go. It's like a random Saturday. The live should have a schedule on it somewhere in the beginning of September so that anybody can know, and you can just need your own copy of Netflix to be able to watch it with me. And it'll be the same thing. I can't show you guys the screen or audio or anything. It's just me reacting to everything. And I've only seen the first episode, but I will rewatch it with you guys because I've only seen it once. I'm very excited for Heartstoppers Season 2, but that's the point. About Red, White, and Blue. This is follows the love story between Alex and Henry, which is Alex is the president's son, and then Henry is the Prince of Wales, or the Prince of England, if you want to say it. I fucking love this book. It brings me so much joy. It gets rid of all my anxiety. It's basically the best antidepressant I've ever had. And the book is slowly becoming the new thing for it, which I adore, I love, and I think they were just so well cast. And I could not speak highly enough. But I've talked to nauseam about this book on my channel and just in general since I've read it in like 2019. Continuing onward, the next one we need to talk about is Fallen by Lauren Kate. So in October, I think, because I don't really think we have plans, I don't think I have time in September, so in October, I'm going to be doing a video where I'm talking about all of the books in Fallen, the series. This includes the novella, and then also Cam's book as well. And so I started that read towards the middle of August, and I ended up rating this one like a 3. I don't absolutely love the first book for Fallen. I don't think Lauren Kate's writing holds up, and it was a very sad like reread for me just because I didn't love it as much as I thought I did. But that being said, this follows Luce as she is sent to a boarding school where she ends up meeting a boy named Daniel that she believes she's known her whole entire life, and there's reasons behind that. I will mention before you jump into this. This is an extremely religious novel. It deals with angels, specifically angels from God and things, and so just go into that knowing it. It's very dark too, very emo. It's a fun time, but it's very emo. Alright, the next one we're going to talk about are next two. We'll talk about is The Meg by Stephen Alton, and then also we'll talk about its sequel, The Meg 2, The Trench by Stephen Alton. So let's start with The Meg. The Meg is about Jonas Taylor as he is exploring parts of the unknown where he accidentally, with a group of other people, releases the Megalodon onto the world, and it's about him trying to solve that problem, somewhat failing. And I did not like it. I didn't really like it at all. I gave it like a 2.5. I thought the writing was pretty bad. Not that it's horrible. I've definitely read worse. But I also just found the movie a little bit more fun, even though it's nothing. It's somewhat like the source, but it's very different. And then we have The Meg 2, The Trench, which also follows Jonas. It just follows it a little differently. I don't want to spoil the events because it technically is a direct sequel, so I won't spoil too much about here. With that being said, this one I did kind of enjoy a little bit better. I think I rated it like a 2.75. Nothing great. I will not be continuing on with this series. It's quite big of a series too, which is kind of crazy. This one introduces a few other fun things, but it's mostly about the Meg as well. Obviously, that's what this entire series is about. I much prefer the movie over it, and the movie has nothing to do with the book whatsoever. They're like, we're just gonna pick some characters and go along with it. That's essentially what they did. Nothing. Absolutely nothing, but I much preferred the movie. I just went and saw that the other day, and I adored The Trench. It's a horrible movie, don't get me wrong. I don't know if I recommend it, but I adored it for the trashiness that it was. The next one we're talking about is The Life of a Wannabe Mongrel by Bella Thorne. This I would count as a memoir, so I did not rate it personally. If I don't rate a memoir a 5, which means I totally recommend it to you, it's basically not, like, it's not something I would constantly recommend to people, but it's someone's life, so I don't want to rate it below a 5. My own personal preference, you guys can rate however you guys want. I have a whole video talking about rating my rating system. That's changed dramatically, so maybe, would you guys want to see me redo that video? Or maybe I'll do a TikTok about it, or a short or something? I don't know. But that being said, there's some stuff in here that I absolutely loved, and there's other parts in here. I'm trying to find a good, like, image. So then you have things like this, where you can't, like, really read it at all, and so, like, it was a mixed bag for me. I think there's some really interesting things to say about it. I will be reading this one with several other books that we're about to talk about in a video for a 48-hour readathon challenge that should be going up relatively in the beginning of September, so you hear more of my thoughts and opinions right after I read it in that video. That being said, the next one we're going to talk about is Inheritance by Elizabeth Salcedo. This is a visual poem that I read with you in that video, so in case you guys want to read it with me, you totally can. I adored this. It was a 5. If you can get your hands on it, it's beautiful. Not shocking though, it's Elizabeth Salcedo. She's like probably one of my favorite authors of all time. Then I read Stephen King's The Dark Man, which I will have to say I did not particularly enjoy. There are some choices here. It was written back in the 60s, and I just think you can really tell it was written back in the 60s. This was another visual poem, and it's just, I don't know, maybe it was the artwork, but it just seemed really not okay. I gave it like a 2.75, I think I rounded up on Goodreads to a 3. Moving on, we have the next one, which is Light Filters in Poems by Caroline Kaufman. This was written by a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, and it broke me in so many different ways. It sent me into a mental distraught. Who's amazing. I could not recommend it enough, especially if you guys are poetry friends. It's beautiful. It was a 5 out of 5 in my opinion. Next we're going to talk about is Alone by Megan E. Freeman. This is about a girl who ends up going and running away just for a night. She does the whole plan about it, and then when she comes back, her entire town's gone, and the only thing she has is her dog, and it's about her surviving in this wilderness for 3 or 4 years, and it goes back and forth between beforehand and during her time. It is written in poem. I didn't care for it super much. I was more reading it for trying to figure out, one, what a middle grade situation would look like for this, and I think it just reads like a middle grade situation would look like for this, which is objectively what it is. So I'm sure, like, if you think that's interesting, you think that's something you're value, I think you'll probably love this. I gave it a 3 though. The next one we're going to talk about is Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black. This one was one of my favorite books I've read this month, but it's also one of my favorite books I've read this year. It would definitely be my top 5 of the year, or my top 23 of the year when we get down to those videos, which is crazy. That's coming up relatively soon, and I don't want to think about it either way. So we have Daniel Black's Don't Cry for Me. This is about a dad who is writing letters to his gay son after he realizes that he is going to be dying, and so he wants to write his entire life story dating back to his grandfather's story to try to explain why he was the way he was when his kid was growing up and afterward. And it was beautiful, it was heartbreaking, it was everything I ever wanted, and I would highly recommend. Just know it's extremely sad, and you will probably cry, even though the title tells you not to. The next one we're going to talk about is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab, or Victoria Schwab, because V.E. Schwab is basically not her pen name anymore. Everything's basically under the same name of Victoria. I read this. This is the 3rd book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. She did a video series on her YouTube channel where she basically recapped the entire thing in preparation for Threads of Power. I thoroughly enjoyed the finale. This is one of my favorite 3rd acts I've ever read. Could not recommend the series enough. I'm very sad I slept on it for such a long time. I think I only have the Vicious trilogy or duology to read, and then I've read every single one of her books outside of Threads of Power, which is about to come out in September, which obviously at this point I will be picking up for sure. Then we can go through and talk about, we'll talk about them together. Torment and Passion. Once again, these are just reread. Torment I liked a little bit better, so this one was like a 3.5. And Passion is by far my least favorite so far, and this was like a 2.25. Torment and Lucy has to go off to a different school, and then Passion is all about flashbacks, a thing I absolutely hate, and they just didn't work. Also, Passion has one of the worst plot twists I've ever read in my entire life. I'll talk about more of those in that specific video. No reason to stay on it. Then I read Fable by Adrienne Young. Fable was recommended to me by a friend. It's for my 5 books people I love video, which originally has come out in August. Now definitely coming out in September. I just have the last book to read, which I should be reading relatively soon. This one is about a girl who is on this seashore town, and she's trying to escape because she's with people who are super abusive, and she ends up going on to a pirate ship. It's all about found family, but it's also about her trying to find her family and other things. This is the other book that I was talking about, where about halfway through the novel I thought it should have probably ended there, and then the whole plot of the other half of the novel should have been the sequel. So I'm curious to see what the actual sequel is about. Yet the ending, which had a cliffhanger twist, did not care for, so we'll see. That's Fable. I gave it a 4, and I'm excited to talk a little more details about what I actually liked and didn't like in that video, which is coming to relatively soon. The next one we're talking about is Killjoy by Holly Jackson. This is a Good Girl Guide to Murder novella. This takes place before the events of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and this follows Pip as she is whisked away to a birthday party that is framed as a murder mystery dinner with her and her friend, and she is playing a character, and they're trying to figure out the murder of Reginald Remy. And so I decided instead to play along with them and solve the murder with Pip. We have a whole murder board in the video, It's super duper fun, and that video will come out relatively shortly as well. I don't know exactly, but it'll come out in the beginning of September. And I'm very excited for you guys to see it. I do talk full spoilers there. This was a 5. If you love that series and you've been interested in this novella and you're wondering if it's any good or not, highly recommend. If I'm being honest with you, the 2 books I recommend from that series is Killjoy Now and A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Both were phenomenal. Then we have Moon of the Crested Snow by Wannabe Rice. This is about a Native American community that ends up going through an outage and realizing very shortly afterward that the whole world had gone through this power outage that sent everybody into like a big craze, and it's about their town and how they're surviving and things. And I felt like it was okay. I'd heard nothing but amazing things. The hype was so high for this one, and I actually don't think it lived up to it in my opinion. I gave it about a 3. I felt like I enjoyed it. There's objectively nothing wrong with the book, but it wasn't my favorite thing I've ever read, and I did find it somewhat disappointing as well. I felt like the characters were really well done, and I felt the writing was phenomenal. I just felt like the story is where it really was like missing for me, in the sense of, I don't know, I just felt like it was a little bit too slow. It dragged on for a little bit too long for nothing that really happens in the novel. But I would still highly recommend it if you're interested in it and if you like post-apocalyptic novels, because I don't think I've ever really read anything quite like this, just in the same like span, or the same realm of, I don't know, I guess the community aspect, the town aspect. And there are a few things I'm going to pull for my own personal novel that I'm writing that I thought were really cool. And then I thought like, oh, I never really thought about that. Oh, I didn't really think what that would happen like. And so I think that's really interesting. So I pull something from it. And lastly, we'll talk about Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. I have a whole video. I have over an hour long video talking about Kingdom of Ash. I'm not going to talk about it anymore here on nauseam. Those are the 5 stars. It's one of my favorite books in the Throne of Glass series. And it's one of my favorite Sarah J. Maas's. There's still a few scenes in here that I just think are absolutely perfect. Some of the best war scenes I've read in a long time, so I couldn't recommend the series enough. I have spoiler vlogs for the entire series on my channel. But guys, that is the 20 books that I read in the month of August. Please let me know in the comments down below either what books you're really looking forward to reading in the month of September, or your favorite or least favorite books in the month of August. And I'll talk to you guys all next time for another beautiful video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.